I mean, Albanese came into government saying that he would call a royal commission. He gets into government and suddenly no royal commission. So, yeah, there is absolutely no reason, there is no rationale for not holding a royal commission. Why don't we have one yet?
All right, welcome to a special episode of Stand Up Sits Down. We will be going through the terms of reference of the potential COVID Royal Commission, not the inquiry. So, and with me and Robyn have been looking at this all week. I've actually watched it twice now, so 14 hours worth of watching. So it is pretty interesting. There are some pretty boring parts in there, but we're going to give you the Cliff Notes version of everything and just discuss. So, but we'll put a disclaimer. Please do watch it because I'm going to have time codes in here of pretty much everything that I've viewed, so you can go through that. But we won't have time to go through everything because it will probably take us 7 hours to do that after discussion.
And you could just watch it for yourself in 7 hours.
Yes, you certainly could. You certainly could. So, yeah. So, what did you think before we get started? What was your impression of everything?
Yeah, I thought it was an incredibly worthwhile exercise. Now, my husband, who was cynical before COVID and is like 10x cynical now, says, well, it's just as well they got all this stuff on the record because there's absolutely Buckley's chance that they'll actually hold the Royal Commission. So I don't know, I'd like to be more optimistic than that, but I would say the vast majority of people, either speaking as individuals or as representatives of organisations, really knocked it out of the park. Their statements were very to the point. There was some hard-hitting information that was presented. They, on the whole, handled the questions from the senators very well, including some questions that were frankly quite hostile, which I'm sure we'll be getting into.
Yes.
And I do have 2 tips for those of you who are wondering how you're going to get through 7+ hours of this. First tip, you can play it on 1.5 speed. They do speak very slowly. So 1.5 speed's fine. My second hot tip, which stood me in very, very good stead, especially when there were either let's just say hostile questions from certain senators, or there were a couple of people who spoke to the inquiry who, if I had not been engaging in the activity that I was engaging in, I would have been sorely tempted to put my fist through the screen. So my second hot tip, and this is how I got through it, I was doing my morning weight training, and I tell you what, there's nothing that encourages you to really push some heavy weights more than hearing some absolute knob saying something unbelievably stupid. So yeah, it's my hot tip. Exercise while watching this. It certainly will help to channel your energy in a positive direction.
Yes. Yep. Definitely. There are some pretty infuriating parts in there.
Tell you what.
Yeah. I was quite surprised by how I came through it. Actually, I thought there was one person in particular I really thought was really trying to derail things.
Yep.
One person who was clearly just ignorant, and that is the Green senator, who, to be honest, I actually thought he did a reasonable job a lot of the time, apart from just a couple of ignorant comments. And but there was a lot of opinion in there, and there's a lot of players there trying to push their own agenda from both sides, I think. So
that's true. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a fair thing to say. Yep.
Definitely, but that's what it is, and that's why we're going to get a Royal Commission, so we don't have these opinions and agendas. Do it, is it?
Yes, we don't want he said, she said. We need to know what actually happened, what decisions were made by whom. Yeah, I did not send in a detailed submission to the inquiry, but I sent in just a couple of very brief points, chief of which was we had a pandemic preparedness plan. What happened to that? Now, I want to know who actually made the decision to junk that thing. Where is that documented? And what was the rationale given for discarding Australia's evidence-based pandemic preparedness plan? Anyway, so
Yeah, it was brought up a couple of times, but not for a while. So
for a while, yeah, I sent you a time code. I think it was an hour and 45 minutes in, or something like that.
hour and 44. So we'll play that. We had Dr. Scott Prasser, who I was really impressed with at the start. So I think we'll start off with a clip from him.
Very good.
We know the evidence on what they base. The only way we're going to get to the truth about this matter is review. Also, I think it's really worth pointing out, as I'm sure the other participants know, after every disaster or calamity, there's a general tendency has been in Australia to appoint a Royal Commission to find out what the facts are as distinct from all the political debate going on. So to find out who did what, who's accountable, what's the truth of the matter. In 1939, we had Royal Commission of bushfires. We had Royal Commission of bushfires in 2009. We've had Royal Commissions in the floods. We've had Royal Commissions into bridge collapses. So to me, the normal position should be to appoint a Royal Commission.
So he makes some really good points initially. We've had all these Royal Commissions where everything else happens. We had the bushfires, for instance, and he follows that up in this one here.
In terms of health and well-being, this Royal Commission, this potential Royal Commission, must exceed all previous ones, even the ones we've had in the bushfires. Although there were deaths, unfortunate deaths in the Victorian and more recently national bushfires, the deaths did not approximate the number of deaths put through to this recent pandemic. And exactly, this is really one of the issues. How many people actually died of COVID? There's a lot of confusion around that issue. So I think we need a Royal Commission, and I think, I'm a bit surprised that we still haven't got one. So to answer your question, I don't think there's been an issue of such national importance. There's been lots of Royal Commissions into important issues. In the bombing of Darwin by the Japanese in 1942, there was a secret Royal Commission into that, released after the war. So there's lots of examples of Royal Commissions into really important issues, corruption, scandals, health issues, bridge collapses and so on. But no other issue has affected so many Australians and in such a big way as this one. So,
yep. And, obviously hard to argue with this guy. And this guy's been involved in quite a few Royal Commissions already. And he's also written quite a few books on these things. So he's well versed in it, and it makes some huge points there. Like, there was no reason why there should be a Royal Commission, but we know, obviously, we all know.
And it was an election promise. I mean, Albanese came into government saying that he would call a Royal Commission. He gets into government, and suddenly no Royal Commission. So, yeah, there is absolutely no reason. There is no rationale for not holding a Royal Commission. Why don't we have one yet? Yeah, I particularly appreciated him raising the point that nobody knows exactly how many people actually died of COVID. I thought it was really valuable to get that on the record, even if only in this process of inquiry. Yeah, I bet that made him pretty popular among certain of the senators.
Yeah, you could see a little wry smile on his face when he said that too.
Yeah. Yes, landed a blow. No, good for him.
But this is like, when you go through the caliber of these people, you realize, well, like, obviously we know this, but I think a lot of the mainstreamers, they sort of think that it's just cookers and anti-vaxxers and right wingers that are into this. But as you'll see further along in this inquiry, we've got professors, we've got people who study climate change, for instance, who our last people are on the panel here. You know, so we've got people who you would term left wingers who have been through an experience and they've been left out to dry. Yeah, they're probably the
100%. Including, my estimation would be a lot of people who bought the accepted narrative on COVID hook, line, and sinker. Right? They wore their masks and stayed at home when told and went and got their jabs. And when you get people like that saying, "Hey, we need a Royal Commission," man, like, take them seriously.
Yeah, certainly. And, you'll see that with the last people on there. It's just that they're the perfect examples of that. They went along and got their vaccines. They did exactly, they had no fear of doing it. And then got vaccinated and got, as I said, got left out to dry by the government.
Hung out to dry, 100%.
Yep. Hung out to dry, yep.
Clearly people who did not see that coming, right? They were totally trusting. Poor sods. Poor sods. You know?
Yeah.
Man, what a wake-up call.
Which is why we need it. So I've got one more little point here from Prasad, because I really did enjoy his what he was doing there. So, all right.
Well, Senator Green also has questions. So, Senator Antic, if you can, we've got 22 minutes.
Look, I'll probably be briefer than 10 minutes, Chair. So my main area of interest, and we've heard this morning, I think, some really good points about, the way in which what happened during COVID fits in and overlays with matters throughout our history that have also had royal commissions put in place. And it strikes me that we're not talking a lot about the possibility of a royal commission outside inquiries like this. Certainly the media class and the political class don't seem to be pushing this issue like perhaps some others are. I'm interested in knowing from our speakers today what their views are, really from a very broad axe helicopter view, about what they believe are the reasons why there is seemingly a reluctance across our community to entertain the concept of the Royal Commission when it's so clearly required.
Dr. Prasad.
Well, speaking to senators, the answer is politics, isn't it? I mean, everything is politics. So, just remember the Senate COVID inquiry, which released its report in April 2022, chaired by Senator Gallagher. Recommendation 17 was there should be a Royal Commission. Now, that particular Senate report, which was dominated by Labor and Green senators, was highly critical of the Morrison government. And I think, and therefore, to me, it was biased in a sense. Now, the reason why we've had a Royal Commission into the robo-debt crisis called in August 2022, as was promised by the Albanese opposition, but not a Royal Commission into the pandemic where 15 to 20,000 Australians possibly died, is because of politics and because it's hard to do. Politics because there were 5 Labor states and territories involved in managing the COVID. And there was a state election, Victorian election last year, and there was Queensland election this year. So it's politics because any Royal Commission with the right terms of reference and independent members is going to have to, given the litany of complaints that we've partly heard today and which many people have made, not political people, about how the states behaved, then that would have to come under scrutiny.
Exactly.
Nailed it. Yep.
Yeah, mic drop. There you go.
Yeah, that's it. We can all just go home now. No. Yeah.
But pretty much, and I think it's pretty interesting that if you looked at that video there, you see Senator Green, who is the co-chair or the deputy chair, should I say, of the inquiry, leaves her seat. as he's saying that.
Yes, wasn't
Yeah.
that notable? Yes,
Mm.
yes.
Yeah. You know, it's I feel a little bit uncomfortable here, you know.
Mm.
And then he talks about Senator Gallagher too, not Senator Gallagher, Katie Gallagher. She's a minister, isn't she?
Yes, she is.
Yeah, but she was all
Yeah.
for it at the start, and then she got some
Yeah.
swanky new role
Yeah.
in government. And what
Suddenly not
role did she get,
interested.
by the way? Katie
She
Gallagher,
is. She often appears on the
Minister of Finance. There we go.
finance.
That's a
I've
big
seen
one.
her in so many of the Senate hearings where there's where, for example, health bureaucrats are being grilled by the likes of Jared Rennick and Malcolm Roberts and so forth. So yeah, that's interesting. What's she doing in those hearings anyway?
Yeah, I've seen her being grilled by Malcolm Roberts, and Rennick in terms of the I think it was the COVID vaccine and the TGA, possibly. I think we actually played a clip of that previously.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Sorry, something just popped into my head, but I can't remember it. So.
So it'll come back to you. It'll come.
Yeah, probably in the middle of the next clip.
Yeah. So that was pretty much what we got out of the first lot of speakers there. They went on break, but there was another group called the IPA. There was a couple of interesting clips there where they. Now, the IPA is a political think tank, conservative think tank.
Yes, Institute for Public Affairs, Melbourne-based, I gather.
Yes, and they sort of got a little bit bamboozled by one of Senator Shoebridge's questions. They'd done their research because back when Morrison was Prime Minister, they were writing articles about how good lockdowns were and how well we'd done, and we needed to get the vaccine out faster. And they were pressed on that by Senator Shoebridge, and ended up looking pretty embarrassed after that.
Look, the response that they gave to that was that particular article that Shoebridge quoted was, from one of their fellows or whatever their term is, and it didn't represent the views of IPA as a whole. But yeah, I agree. That was pretty embarrassing.
But that's just saying at the start, there's a few different agendas at play there. So obviously clearly, and that was such a gotcha from Shoebridge, who I did not finish watching this hearing with a positive view of Shoebridge, to put it mildly. Yeah, no, there's a bit of a gotcha that he tried to get on our guys. So our people's submission. That was, we might actually cut straight to that. Actually, before we do that, there is one thing I want to play, because we talked a lot about trust last week. And
there was a lot of mentions of trust, and would a royal commission help to regain trust? A lot of people raised that, both the senators and also the people appearing before this inquiry.
Yeah,
or hearing, whatever the official term is.
And 1 hour 22 minutes into this, there's a good rundown of how far trust has fallen, not just with the government, but also between people in Australia.
Stanford Civil Liberties Australia. Just to add to what Dr. Klugman said, if you have a look at any measure of trust in Australia in the last 2 years since the major COVID crisis has passed, 61%, this is from Edelman Trust Barometer as an example, 61% of Australians now say that lack of civility and mutual respect is the worst they've ever seen. More than half of Australians, at 55%, say their default tendency is to distrust something until they see evidence of the fact that it's trustworthy. 61% of Australians say that people are incapable of having constructive and civil debates about issues that they disagree on. 24% of Australians, only 24% of Australians would help someone who strongly disagreed with them or their point of view when they were in need, and only 21% of Australians would be prepared to live in the neighbourhood of someone who strongly disagreed with them or their point of view. The result of that is that 48% of Australians now see government as unethical and incompetent, and media has been reduced to an echo chamber for 57% of Australians as that trust polarises. And that just makes it harder for government to do their job in discussing and making big decisions that require trust across the whole of the electorate. And for us, I mean, I understand Senator Roberts' comment. I think that the issues around the beginning of this pandemic and the government attitude was driven by a genuine sense of fear, as Dr. Klugman said. And that fear led to government behaviours towards a large number of people in the society that were not good. But a Royal Commission in and of itself doesn't fix anything. The question is whether the government will follow up and implement recommendations that this Royal Commission is going to make. That's what drives trust.
Yeah, you know, it is the point though, isn't it? We can have the Royal Commission and
absolutely.
What happens after that?
My question is, how are 48% of Australians still seeing the government as trustworthy? Really? Like, have they been not paying attention for the past 4 years? 48%. Like, that's about 48% too many, isn't it? Like, no one should trust government after what they have done to the people of this country. And you know, same goes for just about every other government throughout the world. Yeah, it's extraordinary.
I wonder what the stats were before all this, though. You know?
Well, you can go back and have a look at previous Edelman Trust barometers, and I did that a little while ago. I stumbled across it. Oh, actually, I mentioned it during one of my submissions to one of these bloody things, and I can't remember which one it was. It may have been to the Royal Commission inquiry, but I can't remember because I've made several of these. And I went looking for, you know, what are Australians' levels of trust in government, and I stumbled across this Edelman Trust Barometer, and they do actually have a snapshot of, like, you know, here's our latest, and here's how it compares to last year and the year before that and the year before that. And so levels of trust in government, the media, various other institutions do fluctuate over time, and there are, you know, clear, you know, historical events that you can associate with these fluctuations in trust. But it fell off a cliff, basically. And that's public trust of it was media and government in particular that stood out to me, although the Edelman Trust Barometer does look at other institutions, including universities, if I remember rightly. So, yeah, levels of trust in all of these institutions haven't been this low for a good many years. Yeah,
and I think it's obviously going to be different this time too, because obviously none of us can recall a time where the government forced you to shoot mystery goo into your veins, and you know it just bypasses the old, you know, oh, I don't like the way they spent the money on that thing, or I don't like the way that that person's corrupt in government. It's completely different to that, because that trust can be kind of like, you know, almost be forgotten about. Those little, they're not little. Don't get me wrong. They're big things, but they in the minds of the average Australian, they're going to forget about those pretty quickly. But this thing here, where you're actually doing stuff that's ruined people's lives, injured them, and
then gaslighted them, left them without compensation, left them, you know, barely clinging to the fringes of society, because so many of them have lost their jobs without compensation. They can't support themselves. They're relying on the charity of friends, if they're lucky enough to have friends who can take care of them. Yeah. Previously, I don't think any more than a small minority of Australians would have ever formed the thought, I think my government hates me and wants to kill me. And I'm not saying that that's a majority view, but there's a substantial minority of Australians who are seriously contemplating the idea that their government hates them and wants them dead.
Yeah, well, you can't blame people for thinking that, can you? It's
they make deals with serially criminal pharmaceutical companies. They sign contracts that Australians are not allowed to see. They spend money that they extracted from us, the taxpayers, to buy the mystery goo, and then they make people take it. And then when some people get injured, they don't compensate them. Do you have a better explanation than they hate you and they want you dead? I'd like to hear it. I'd love to think that my government doesn't hate me and want me dead, but I'm just like, someone please persuade me.
Yeah.
Sleep at night.
Well, I don't think they're big on persuasion.
Apparently
this
No.
is actually
It's not our response.
Senator Shoebridge who talks about persuasion. I was quite surprised about. Maybe he's angling for something, but
Responsibility. It's their responsibility. No, it's theirs. A bit of buck shifting going on. So, yeah.
Final question, Senator Shoebridge.
When you look at what happened in different states and territories, one view of it is that states and territories went straight to coercion without first trying persuasion. It was straight to police and courts and fines and arrests. When, many people would say Australians are some of the most rule compliant people on the planet, and if you make a persuasive case and you put someone out there with a high vis vest and a clipboard, they'll form a neat queue and they'll do what you ask of them. And perhaps we should be trying to relearn the art of persuasion rather than that sort of aggressive coercion that we had. Would that be a way forward? Should that be a sort of fundamental underpinning when we're looking at even a public health crisis? Maybe we'll reverse the order this time.
He's right there. This is why he came across as a little bit ignorant rather than having malice about him.
Mitch, I wouldn't trust that guy as far as I could kick him. And when I hear him say persuasion, what I hear is we really need to do a better job with our nudge units. We need to get our psychological, operations people onto the job here, because boy, it's really costly to have the jackbooted, police thugs out on the street. Wouldn't it be so much better if we could just get, I don't know, celebrity endorsements or something and just have the dumb schmucks line up to take their mystery goo without a peep? That's what I hear when I hear that guy speak. He just incites a very uncomfortable, spidey sense in me. And look, I mean, what are the Greens? They're basically their ideology is Marxist. They are collectivists. Their whole view of how society should work is individuals don't matter. You do everything for the greater good. But obviously, previous attempts to engender a Marxist paradise on earth didn't work out so well. Stalin, Pol Pot, Chairman Mao, a few little stuff-ups like that. So the likes of Shoebridge, let's do gentle totalitarianism. Let's just very politely and gently and psychologically skillfully nudge people. Yeah, well, nudge this, buddy.
Yeah, I did get that later on with Shoebridge. He really blew that sort of like, oh, okay, maybe he's not such a bad guy for me. By these comments, and we're getting into our people now. So we don't really need to introduce these guys because we know what they're all about. It's what everybody's about here. Everybody's signed the document already, and here's Julian Gillespie and the guys getting asked a pretty stupid question by Shoebridge. And unfortunately, I said this to you over text earlier in the week. I feel like only one of them picked up what he was trying to do. They really got suckered into it. So. And just for reference, this is a straw man tactic of taking down someone. So,
Senator Antic, you still have the call.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to pass it on.
Okay, thank you, Senator Antic. Senator Shoebridge, you have the call.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the submission. I'd be interested to know if we have some sort of common understanding about the general benefits of vaccinations. Do you accept the enormous public health outcomes from vaccinations for example, polio, measles, tetanus, and influenza? Do you accept that there are huge public health benefits from vaccinations for, we'll start with those four?
Mitch, I'm not seeing the
diseases?
video on screen, by the way.
Ah, okay. Yep. Hang on, here we are.
Yep, that's it. Good, good. Thanks.
If I
I
could
wanted
just
everyone to
step in
see
here.
this.
So just, you know,
Julian Gillespie here to answer, if you don't mind. Every person in this room is going to have a different opinion on how that question is best answered.
Well,
We
I'm
have-
asking the unincorporated association. You come here as an unincorporated association, so that's a matter of your structure. So I'm putting it to the whole panel.
So he goes on about the unincorporated corporation. So and this is something that Senator Green was going on about too. She spent the first 10 minutes, was it, just asking questions and going, "Oh, so what do you do? Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
where's your
Well,
office?"
what is this association and where do you work? Like, there were so many comments by the chair, who I thought actually did a pretty good job on the whole. We
chair
have
was
limited
great.
time. Yeah, so the chair is saying, oh, we have limited time today, and there are all sorts of questions that that the people, who attended the inquiry were asked to answer briefly. And meantime, he lets this Senator Green from Labor just go on and on with these completely irrelevant, time-wasting questions. That was, again, that was when I had the heavy weights on, and I'm just like, grunting it out, to channel my rage.
She's like she was acting like she's all aloof as well. Like she didn't really know what she was talking about, but that woman had an answer for everything. She knew exactly what she was doing. She's just didn't really have an argument against them. So she's just twirling it along and trying to make them look like they weren't qualified.
Wasting time. Yeah. 100%. No, she's just a real piece of work, that one.
I saw her said to the Red Union person, "Oh, so how do you join your organisation?" Oh, like any other organisation, you call us or we'll get.
Yeah, you go to the goddamn website. Yeah. What I was thinking was that was obviously the Labor Party doesn't like the idea of competition with their Labor Party affiliated unions. And Red Union, of course, is not a Labor Party affiliated set of organisations.
No, so and you're not a registered union, are you? In a really sort of condescending tone. It's like, no. I was surprised people didn't get too fired up at her, to be honest. It took Jared Rennick to just go, "I've got a point of order. This is not a job interview."
That was brilliant. That was like the line of the day in terms of the senators. Well done, Jared.
bloody fantastic. Yeah. But as you'll see here, that the answers to this question about vaccines is very simple. We're not here to talk about other vaccines.
Yeah.
This is not, we're here to discuss whether this is a vaccine to begin with, because it's not.
You said before this was a straw man argument. It's also very subtly an attempt to engage the ad hominem. Shoebridge did not use the term anti-vaxxer, but it's clear that by implication, he was trying to flush some or all of these people out as anti-vaxxers. So ad hominem and straw man, which I guess that and the appeal to authority would probably be the three most often used informal logical fallacies. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, he also uses the appeal to authority as well later on by quoting the Lancet study and saying, "Do you think that science is wrong?" and blah, blah, blah. But
oh my God.
Yeah.
Get a bucket.
So we had the answers here anyway.
And I'm not asking you to answer. If you can't answer on behalf of the whole panel, I'm putting it to the whole panel.
Okay, so we'll give each person on the panel an opportunity to answer Senator Shoebridge's question. So, Mr. Gillespie, do you have anything further to add?
I will lead out and say that we had pre-existing technology for the production and manufacture of vaccines in this country prior to COVID. which involved time-tested techniques for safety and efficacy. And we never saw the types of injury and mortality rates like we saw with so-called COVID-19 vaccines, which introduced an entirely new and novel technology.
So is that a yes? You accept?
No, I do
enormous
not,
public
because
health
polio
benefits for
introduced
polio,
SV40
measles,
sequences
Sorry,
and
if we
provided
can just
the community
send a
with
sheet with
cancer.
you. Sorry. We need to, please, everyone needs to be, including myself, needs to be mindful of Hansard. So we need a separation between questions and answers.
So I don't mind Julian's response there. It's a good response, but it is feeding into what he's trying to do here. And it took until
Cara Thomas.
it was Cara Thomas, wasn't it? It's I think just here.
Also, and we're here to discuss the COVID terms of reference.
Thank you.
There we are.
Yes.
And there's
Good answer. I was like, yeah, go Cara. No, that was exactly what should have been said by all of them. This question is not relevant. I'm not answering it. We're here for one reason and one reason only, which is to discuss why Australia needs to have a Royal Commission. End of story.
Yeah. Certainly is. You know, that sort of you just can't have that. I mean, he's a senator. He's doing as he wants to do, as Malcolm Roberts does, and Antich and Rennick.
Yep. No, fair point. Fair point.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I can probably see how they might have felt a bit intimidated, because they did seem a little bit underrepresented, the pro-vaxxers in this whole hearing, didn't they?
Well, generally, like the government did great. They just need to improve a few little things, and then it just would have been absolutely hunky dory. Yeah, not so many of those.
Yeah, we had a little snarky comment at the end of this too, which I don't think I got the actual time code of that, but so I won't try to find it. But Senator Green, at the end of all this, they were talking about the vaccines, and she said. And one of the panel members here sort of said, well, they don't get information, the right information given when vaccines are given. And right before it's about to finish and go to a break, she goes, well, I got my vaccine and I got all my information. So from a deputy chair, that I don't think that's
it was pretty out of line. Absolutely. I mean, oh my God. Anyway, I try to be a good person and not wish harm on other people, even when they're objectionable prats. But man, I hope she's up to date with all her boosters.
I'd say she is.
She'd have mine.
It's probably what makes her say a little bit too much. So that's why she can't speak like a normal human being.
Oh dear.
And then we got to the pro-vaxxers, who I'm not sure if these guys were put in there by the Labor government themselves. But what was your view on that? So we had a guy called was it Mark Moran? Dr. Mark Moran.
Professor Moran to you, pleb.
Professor Moran. Yeah, there we go. So, and he came in about the fourth hour, along with a bunch of other shills. I'm not sure about you, but I feel like the whole point of this, having these people here was to push more government regulations. So
oh god, yeah, especially the one from the Nurses and Midwives Association, who, if she had her way, I'm sure would have Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and every other social media locked down tighter than a fish's rear end, so that nasty misinformation that destroys people's trust isn't allowed to circulate. Non-evidence-based opinions and so forth. Oh, yeah. Again, I tell you what, I was like pushing the weights then to avoid putting my fist through the screen.
This is a woman who's in charge of the bloody, Midwives and Nurses Association.
Yeah,
And
and quite frankly, sounds like a kindy teacher. I mean, no offense to kindy teachers. Of course, kindy teachers are lovely people. You just don't expect one to be heading up a major professional organisation.
she reminded me of the way Hillary Clinton talks to people, actually, when I was looking at her.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah, just very, very scripted, and she's done it so many times that it's become like a natural thing for her to do. So this is her on the CDC anyway.
The has any state or territory done that process, taken stock of how the public health system responded, and done that kind of system-wide analysis?
I think that that is definitely.
Can't see the video.
Oops, I got to stop doing that.
You're right. There she is, the kindy teacher of the year.
Happened. And I think there have been, we have participated, and I'm sure the RACGP has participated in the consultations and the calls around a Centre for Diseases Prevention, a CDC, for, I've got the acronym wrong there, I'm sorry.
You sure do.
We think that a system...
Everybody knows it's the Centre for Disease Creation.
And Promotion.
Yes.
Decision like that would strongly help in not just taking stock of the public health response, but what we need and what our members really struggled with at the beginning. And we totally acknowledge once in a century, happening, the evidence, nobody knew anything in the world about it.
Bollocks! Diamond Princess, sorry.
Yeah. I love how this keeps coming up. Nobody knew anything except for like everybody on the alternative news who seem to have known everything, and it's all come true over the last 2 years.
100%.
Yeah.
But you see what I mean about the kindy teacher vibes, right? She's just got this patronising way of speaking to people as if everyone that she's addressing is 3 and isn't nearly as smart as them.
You can just imagine her. You can just imagine her speaking to like a nurse who's like, "Oh, look, I've had a really bad reaction to the first vaccine. Can I get an exemption?" "Oh, look, darling, no, it's just not going to happen. You're just going to have to go ahead and get the second one if you want to keep your job." That sort of patronising tone.
Yeah. See, it's hard to watch this without the weights. Yeah, I gotta say.
You just need to get a dumbbell. and then here she is on which is even more worrying, because this is like goes into the mis and disinformation bill now. So here's an hour and a half of people who are supporting the government's push for this, and including old Mr. Greens here, Mr. Shoebridge. So
comments on the role of social media and non-evidence-based attacks that seem to get repeated on social media, the role of that in undermining trust in the health professions and in the advice that's coming from the health profession more broadly.
Could I take
would you like to get this?
Yeah. I think it had an enormous impact, unfortunately, and sometimes positive, but sometimes negative. And because it's difficult for people to understand that, as Professor Morgan said earlier, health knowledge changes all the time. We're always updating and evolving.
Isn't that funny they say that now? It's changing all the time, but at the time, if you question anything, like, no, this is the science. Don't you trust the science?
This is the science, and you must obey the science, or even though it's different from what it was yesterday, but you still have to obey it. And non-evidence-based. Oh, you mean like when people were sharing excerpts from studies or government data online, and that was non-evidence-based. Ugh. Seriously, these people make me puke.
Oh yeah, do you remember the study they did about conspiracy theorists? And
which one?
Well, the study came back saying that people who are in that camp are actually a lot more well informed than your average person. So they kind of had to can it in the end.
Yeah. Do you mean the one where they were looking at people who were creating and sharing? It was basically about the use of graphics and images online, or like representing data in the form of charts and images and so forth. Is that the one you mean?
Yeah, and they were saying they're very organised. We're all very organised, and we're
Gave
very
a
well
big
informed.
thumbs up for, like, these people get together in forums and they discuss, the quality of evidence, and they give each other hints and tips on how to obtain evidence and how to critique it and make sure it's legit and all the rest of it. And yes, so the people who are questioning the science are actually using the scientific method. Storm them.
Yeah, it's it's the equivalent, like what they think of people using online social media to spread misinformation it's the equivalent of us thinking that everybody who got the vaccine is a raving lunatic who wears a mask to bed and in the car by themselves and all that sort of stuff. It's just not true. It's a very small minority of the population, and there's definitely people like that who believe everything they hear, like there is on the other side. But clearly, like we were saying, this is being used to push that agenda.
More censorship.
It's one of the most rapidly evolving areas. It's very difficult for people to understand in that situation. What we knew about COVID-19 in the first month changed within 6 months, and changed so fast because we just kept getting more and more information. So it seemed like people didn't know what they were doing, but we were constantly responding and evolving. There were people, unfortunately, who didn't dig into the evidence for a range of reasons, and it's not...
What you mean, like everybody that listened to the mainstream news, they never dig.
Yeah. And so okay, on the one hand, what we were learning, it was changing and evolving all the time. But if you didn't follow the directions that were based on that incomplete information, you were a bad person, you were a criminal, you should be fined or arrested or have your head kicked in by the police. So on the one hand, she's saying, well, we just can't have, up-to-date information. It's constantly changing. On the other hand, government policy was based on that incomplete information, which was conveyed by health ministers and all their little lackeys as being the science. So, get your story straight, woman.
And there were governments around the world who were saying, do not do your research. I'm not sure, I can't recall hearing it in Australia, but I know New Zealand was saying it. They were saying, we're your one source of truth.
We will be your single source of truth.
Yeah.
There were multiple articles published in the US media. Like Forbes had one, maybe Washington Post. There were multiple media outlets that published variations on a theme of doing your own research is dangerous and will lead to the wrong answer, and you must leave it to the experts. So no, that was a trope that was out there, man.
Yeah. Don't do your own research. You'll end up going to the gym, working out, and turning into a neo-Nazi.
Nationalist.
So, yeah.
Oh my God.
There it goes. A couple of scientific papers, and then you're, hailing Hitler. So yeah, she was a real fun one, this lady.
Yeah, she was. She would have us all, goose stepping and having to use our digital IDs to log on to social media, and then, losing social credit points if we dared share anything that wasn't government approved narrative.
Oh yeah. And this is where it's leading. We even get a little bit further to probably I can't believe I haven't played a clip of Senator Green yet, but
she was a classic, wasn't she? Nita.
Nita.
N-I-T-A. Nita Green.
What I can come up with by looking at her social media is she really likes soccer and vaccines and climate change. So That's her three things. And she's
There you
I
go.
think she's in North Queensland. She's a senator from North Queensland. So,
And she's
yes.
a shining picture of good health, as our viewers can see. Sorry, audio listeners, you'll just have to go to where are we? Where are we, Mitch? About 5 hours 19 in to see what a fine figure of a woman our Senator Nita Green is.
This is a really good overview of how conniving and snipey she is as well. This is her basically pushing the boosters.
It's probably too late in the day to go through all of them, so we'll maybe get that from you on notice. Just following on from the question, I mean, look, I have no intention, unlike other senators, of making this some sort of
Little snarky aside
debate about vaccine efficacy, but just on the current health risk to COVID-19 for COVID-19.
I've got no interest in making this about vaccine efficacy, but I'm going to make it about vaccine efficacy in the next comment.
There are still patients that are vulnerable to COVID-19 like having to be hospitalised, and I wondered whether the Royal Australian College of GPs could maybe comment.
There's the brain fog. You can see it. Yeah, too many boosters.
Yeah. Time for your next booster. By the way, do you know, Mitch, would there be any Australians who are vulnerable to getting a really bad case of the flu and requiring hospitalisation for that?
Are there?
Yeah. Do you reckon there would be? Do you reckon there's anyone in Australia who might, by dint of old age or general infirmity, be susceptible to the flu?
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
Definitely not. No. Any other respiratory viruses, community-acquired bacterial pneumonia?
No.
Do you reckon there's anyone in this country who might be vulnerable to that? Because why the freak aren't we talking about them? Why COVID all the bloody time? As if this country has never seen anyone get sick or be hospitalised or die from respiratory pathogens.
I know it's. Yeah, as we were talking before the show, us talking with the doctor about the cough that the whole family seems to have, and the first thing was it's COVID, it's post-COVID, but without any.
You sure it's not long COVID?
Oh, Jesus Christ! Wow, we got some good stuff on that coming up.
Oh, you betcha. Yep.
On that, I know people are. I don't want to panic anyone, but I know that there's still an ongoing.
But I kind of do.
Groups of our community.
Yes, there's an ongoing risk for the amount of COVID-19 that's spreading around the community at the moment, but also the potential risk of new variants that are either more contagious or more virulent. And there's an ongoing need to make available and inform people about the availability of vaccine boosters, of antiviral treatment, and it's to be given early and to be effective in people at high risk, and an ongoing need, I think, to remind people of some of the lessons we learned about personal protection and avoiding the spread of infections.
All right, so he's reminded us of COVID boosters, antivirals, and he's not talking about ivermectin, he's talking about Paxlovid and things like that don't work and then end up giving you COVID again. And then personal protection like masks, which don't work and have been proven not to work. All this stuff. I read some of this guy's papers before this, and he's got studies on. He's written 60 papers, and he's got studies in there on how mobile phone screen can spread COVID and things like that. So this guy's fully bought into it. I didn't put too much of this guy on because I actually thought my computer was going to stop working. He was so boring and slow. So this is why there's not more of this guy, because he did actually do quite a lot of talking at the start. Yeah.
And sorry, this is like, maybe this is inside baseball for a lot of people, but anyway, I'm just going to get this off my chest. It drives me completely batty when these underqualified individuals claim the title of professor. Again, this is kind of inside baseball, but anyone who's had any contact with academia knows that for you to legitimately have the title professor, you need to have a terminal degree, like a PhD, basically. Professor Mark Morgan is actually not Professor Mark Morgan. I just looked this up. He's an associate professor. Now, medicine is one of the very few, I think it might be the only, school within universities that allows lecturers to claim the title of professor when they're in fact associate professors, and associate professors do not have terminal degrees, right? In other words, you can claim this bogus title of professor if you happen to be, teaching medicine, when you have essentially your undergraduate degree. Okay, so either like your BMed or your MBBS. Sorry, again, a lot of people will be yawning and going, who cares? It matters a lot because if you're a law professor, you've got a PhD in law, okay? These supposed professors of medicine don't. They're basically just pumped up doctors who've maybe done, a postgrad diploma or something like that. I will actually check a little bit further into the academic background of Mark Morgan, but I'll just about guarantee you he don't have a terminal degree.
So why is that? Why is that the only degree? Is that just to make it look more credible so they can
exactly
sell more drugs or
Well, it goes to the heart of how it is that medicine has become this virtual priesthood, and doctors who are compared to other professions, wildly underqualified, are treated with this absolute reverence. I mean, they have the hide to call themselves scientists. They don't have any training in science or the scientific method. Now, a medical degree is tough from the point of view of there's an enormous amount of information that you have to essentially memorize and then regurgitate. But it is not an education. It is training. There's a big difference. There's no critical thinking component in the teaching of medicine, let alone the practice of it. Anyway, that's my little rant. Apologies to people who don't see the relevance of this, but look it up. See if there's anyone.
I think it's very relevant.
If you look at other faculties of universities, whether it's science or architecture or engineering or whatever, you'll see that if someone's called a professor, they have a terminal degree. And that matters. I'm not saying that the processes by which one gains a PhD are perfect, but you at least have to have demonstrated the intellectual capacity to earn a terminal degree, a higher degree. Anyway, rant over.
Well, I'm just going to go back in time on this clip a little bit, because what you said just reminded me of a clip of him getting asked a question by Senator Rennick.
Oh yes,
and it just
one Mitch. Yeah.
It just goes to show how little this guy knows about anything. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Senator
Chair.
Roberts. Senator Rennick, you have the call. Are you there?
Yeah, hi, Chair. I'm here.
Excellent.
Hi, guys. As you know, under the immunisation handbook, one of the requirements is that patients have to be fully informed of the risks of taking a vaccine. Therefore, the doctors and nurses and pharmacists who administer this vaccine should also be fully informed. Were the doctors and nurses who administered vaccines fully informed about the risks of the vaccine?
Professor Morgan, if we can provide you an opportunity to answer that question first, and then I'll go to Ms Butler.
Thank you, Senator.
Simple yes or no, do.
The information that Tagi had was available to the doctors as well. So doctors were spent an inordinate amount of time and energy trying to be informed, because they were making decisions on behalf of whether to recommend vaccines to their patients or not.
Were doctors and nurses given a copy of the product assessment report and the non-clinical report on the Pfizer vaccine?
Sorry, Senator Rennick, I don't want to interrupt, but was that question directed to both Professor Morgan and Ms Butler? Because I'd like Ms Butler to have an opportunity to answer.
I'll speak with Professor Morgan.
Okay, all right. Over to you, Senator.
That might have been the wrong call, Senator, because I don't know, can't remember back to whether or not doctors were given which specific documents doctors have access to.
Okay, so you're not sure. Okay, are your doctors aware, for example, that the vaccine had an enormous amount of missing information in regards, and I'll list some of the missing information, and that's outlined on page 31 of the product assessment report in regards to the vaccine.
Sorry, Senator Rennick, if I can just interrupt you there. Are you referring to one of the documents you were wanting to table? So
yes.
could you please refer to the two documents you're seeking to table, and then we will provide it to Professor Morgan, but Professor Morgan may well want to take on notice, given he would have just received the documents. So we're looking to get those to him.
That's fine. I'm sure he'll understand the question regardless of the document. So effectively, the vaccine wasn't tested for pregnancy and breastfeeding when it was initially approved. It wasn't tested on patients who are immunocompromised. It wasn't tested in frail patients with comorbidities, people with pulmonary disease, diabetes, chronic neurological disease and cardiovascular disorders. It wasn't tested on patients with autoimmune or inflammatory disorders. It wasn't tested in interaction with other vaccines, and there was no long-term safety data on the vaccine. Were doctors informed of this missing information, and did they inform their patients of that missing information?
Again, I don't know the answer to that. I can take that on notice. Clearly, the long-term safety information was not available for new vaccines, so doctors were very aware that that there was no long-term safety information available.
Well, okay, let's just speak to yourself.
All right, so I don't know and I don't know. For a guy who says that everything's fine, he doesn't know anything.
There was another question that Jared Rennick put to him about immune imprinting, and he admitted, Morgan admitted that he had never heard the term before. Now, I'm going to make a live and on-air correction, because I just had looked him up while you were playing that, and he does, in fact, unusually for a professor of medicine, he does in fact have a PhD. So, okay, fair enough, he has a PhD. That doesn't automatically qualify you to hold a professorship, though. So my criticism before about the misappropriation of the term professor by people who actually don't academically qualify for it still stands. Because, to get tenure as a professor, you require a pretty substantial publication record. Anyway, so, that was well played by Jared Rennick, wasn't it?
He really impresses me with his knowledge.
Yep.
He really has done his reading. He knows what he's talking about. He says it well. He speaks well. Is it just me, or is Rennick sound like he's getting more and more pissed off every time the closer he gets to the end of his tenure at
damn the torpedoes! Like he's just like, I'm just going to go out all guns blazing, and good on him. Yeah, good on him.
He just doesn't take any shit out anymore.
So that's just to be polite with it, but yes, you can sense the edge, can't you? You can sense the edge.
Yeah, he certainly wasn't polite to Senator Green at the start there, where he said, "It's not a bloody job interview," So
good on him.
It's just great. It's good to. I really feel lucky that we do have politicians like that, because there's really not that many countries going around in the world at the moment that actually have as many politicians as we do. Think what you think about politics. Yeah, we've actually got a really good bunch. Obviously, most of them aren't.
but proportionate to our population. I mean, who's the UK got? Andrew Bridgen. And occasionally, I think there's a few other Tory MPs who had the gonads to stand up and be counted. But pretty much it's Andrew Bridgen. In the US, there's a handful. There's Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, kind of sort of, but his wife's heavily invested in pharma stock, so he doesn't push too hard on that.
He could push a lot harder, couldn't he, Rand Paul? Sort of. Son of Ron Paul, you think he would be a little bit do a little bit more, but in saying that, he has done some good stuff. He has questioned a lot of things, and I guess when you're in that industry, then there's some things you kind of have to be careful about. But Otherwise, you might end up like a few other people in American politics over the time.
Indeed.
Now we've got our last group who I really wanted to get into because I just found them really great. We did get in contact with them, but unfortunately they're only doing mainstream interviews at the moment, which is perfectly understandable to get this out there.
They want to be taken seriously.
Definitely. And they're not saying anything that we don't know already. But just to see how these guys went about it and their level of knowledge. And I even learned a few things off these guys about exactly how the whole process works when going to get a vaccine injury compensation. So they're called Coverse, and I had heard the name, but I didn't really know a lot about them at all.
In which you appear.
Thank you. My name is Rachel O'Reilly. I'm here as one of the co-founders of Coverse, which is a national science-led charity set up for Australians who've been harmed by or lost a loved one to the COVID vaccines.
Thank you.
And I'm Dr. Rado Faletic, also co-founder of Coverse and director as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you have an opening statement you'd like to make?
I do, yeah.
Okay, over to you, Ms. O'Reilly.
So Coverse exists since 2022 because neither the federal government nor any state and territory governments are providing adequate support for citizens affected by these products. We do what government should be doing, which is communicating with citizens harmed by a government-approved drug, fostering appropriate research connections and addressing glaring information deficits. We work closely with our international patient advocacy counterparts and the universities and research bodies that they are connected to, studying people's reactions to COVID vaccines. No Australian medical research organisation is yet working directly with us as patients in this country. My colleague Rado has a PhD in science and is a consultant in the area of international scientific collaborations. I have a master's in media and culture and do research on neoliberalism, populism and climate change. We've both taken many vaccines throughout our lives with no issues whatsoever. We're able to present today only because we had family support covering lost incomes and investing their savings to help us access tests and treatments that aren't covered by the government. There was no infrastructure set up to support Australians suffering from COVID vaccine reactions, and there still is not. The people who we represent are dealing with life-changing injuries and institutional and social ostracisation that we would argue is comparable to the earliest days of the AIDS pandemic. Comparable. Our early diagnostic and therapeutic information early on only came via international social networks of affected people, existing under heavy global media and medical censorship erected around the discourse of emergency. Most importantly, people with serious COVID vaccine reactions come from all walks of life and got vaccinated at the request of Australian governments to protect our communities. Contrary to claims made about us, without us, by government, our reactions are rarely mild or self-resolving. COVID vaccine reactions can involve cardiac, neurological, immunological, cognitive, and other disabilities. They can appear very suddenly in days and weeks, while others develop more gradually. Our data shows it takes at least 8 months to see any improvement whatsoever in people's symptoms. The government's own pharmacovigilance data has over 22,000 reports of serious adverse events following COVID vaccination, including several thousand with cardiac inflammation. To our knowledge, fewer than 1% of cases have had a claim approved by the government's punitively narrow compensation scheme, and half of work cover claims, approximately, that we know of have been rejected. The adverse events reports for the COVID vaccines constitute almost a quarter of all drug reaction reports published by the TGA since 1971, yet our cases did not raise any safety signals. Our submissions to 10 federal and state inquiries detail the scale and scope of medical and institutional harms that we faced. Despite the evidence, our situation has barely changed in 3 years. We appreciate our first appearance speaking directly to Parliament today.
Yeah, really
Very
impressive.
powerful.
Yeah, just very emotional, but managed to keep her shit together. And
Yep. And of course, Shoebridge had to pretend to be deeply concerned about these poor suffering people. I didn't find his appearance of concern especially persuasive myself, but that's just me.
No, it's very inconvenient for them.
Yeah.
To see these people and have to speak to them right in their face.
Absolutely, and to be as passive aggressive toward them as they were toward, Gillespie and Ian Brighthope and the Red Union people and so forth would have been a really bad look for the Labor and the Greens senators who are sticking to the party line. So yeah, I thought it was beautifully timed that those two people were the last to appear.
Definitely. Especially after a big day, 7 hours of hearing all this stuff.
Yeah.
It does have a toll on your energy levels, and to get hit by that at the end, it is going to leave a lasting impression, even on those, the scumbags of the group. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And this is like just for everybody's interest, because I didn't know exactly what was covered under the scheme. She will say what is covered and what isn't covered under the scheme, and it's pretty crazy, because especially when you look at the Pfizer documents and they actually come up with a absolute shit ton of adverse reactions that they see. So I'm not sure why this is the only one. Well, of course we know why these are the only ones that are on there, but anyway, just make sure you can see it first.
Yep, we're on.
Because it can probably encapsulate a lot of the problems that we're facing. The Australian government's compensation program was set up in late 2021 to try and give the Australian public some sort of safety net and an assurance that if something went wrong, they would be looked after. However, what you don't realise, and what the Australian public doesn't realise, and what we didn't realise until after we got injured, was that the scheme was designed so narrowly that hardly any of us qualify for it. And we've got to wonder, why was that done? And this comes back to the Royal Commission and why questions need to be asked about that in particular. So some conditions are recognised by the TGA and are claimable by the compensation scheme. So, for example, if you happen to have myocarditis from the Pfizer vaccine and you were hospitalised, lucky you might be able to get compensation. But if you had the AstraZeneca vaccine and got the same health condition, suck eggs. That's the approach that the government has taken. And despite many of us over this course of these 3 years screaming at the tops of our voices, trying to get our concerns and our stories out there and addressed by government, nothing has changed. Nobody wants to address the issues that are affecting us directly. And that's the challenge we face. It's almost...
And not only that, you had to have spent a night in hospital as well. So
yes, I actually know one of my clients was in exactly that situation. He has myocarditis, but he was not initially hospitalised. So even though he cannot work in his trade anymore, he can't work at all. He's basically bedbound. He doesn't qualify for compensation, and it's a pitiful sum. It's just a pathetic insult of an amount of money that's given to these people if they qualify at all. Yeah,
barely anything. So, and I mean, they say in here too that the reporting system's so bad that most people have to self-report in here, which then leaves it open to people saying, well, they just did it because they don't believe in vaccines. They had to self-report. If it was an actual thing, the doctor would have done it.
Well, again, I mean, this is anecdotal, but a uni friend of my son's went and got his second Pfizer shot to keep his part-time job. Ends up in hospital with myocarditis, and it's told by one of the doctors on the ward that they're seeing 20 or 30 a week like him. This was back in late 2021, and that they weren't reporting any of them. None of these people had been reported to Dan. And as one of them, I can't remember which of them, but one of them pointed out, doctors were intimidated by the letter from AHPRA. Many doctors interpreted that letter from AHPRA, which basically said, don't you say anything adverse about these jabs. Many doctors took that as a warning that they should not report any adverse reactions to the vaccines if they wanted to keep on being doctors. And again, I know this, I've heard this from clients of mine who are vaccine injured. Their doctors won't report it.
Yep. And it's such a shame that people still think, oh, it's anecdotal. Oh, you know, it doesn't mean anything because it's anecdotal, hasn't been any scientific studies or hasn't been admitted by the authorities. It's never going to be admitted. The anecdotes are all we've got. And any anecdote's the start of any discovery anyway. It's the start of any scientific study or discovery.
You observe a phenomenon and you say, that's interesting. I wonder if there's something behind that. And then you form a hypothesis and then you engage in formal data collection, okay, and data analysis. But it all starts with an observation, which by definition is an anecdote. One of them, again, I can't remember which of the two it was, also said that the doctors, you know, the small number of doctors that they found that are actually doing their best to help them, in order to get them appropriate testing and care, they don't even mention vaccine injuries, for instance, on pathology request forms. Instead, they engage in this little creative fiction that these people are suffering from long COVID, because that's the only way that they can actually get the tests covered by Medicare.
Yeah.
So
she actually goes into that later on, how she's had to be tested 3 times.
And then Rado, I've forgotten his last name, but Rado also said that. Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. That's right. He said, okay, so you've got this massive underreporting of vaccine injuries to Dane. And then the TGA says, look, there's hardly any reports of adverse reactions. These things must be safe and effective. That's pretty neat. Yep. And having said that, they've still got more notifications to Dane from this product than, you know, all the other pharmaceuticals put together.
She said 25% of since 1960. She say,
yeah, but it's still massively underreported.
Of course, and like you'll see, like the list of the things that are included and aren't here, and it's no wonder.
Yep.
It's like the iceberg underneath that, you know, the meme of the iceberg. You can see the top of it and the rest is under the water. This is exactly how it is.
They were policy wishes, policy positions, rather than backed by robust science that could actually stand up to broad and intense scrutiny. So, in answer to your question, we want to know the answer, basically, and I think the Australian public deserves the answer.
And you made that, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just thought I'd be a bit more specific. So the list of covered conditions in the compensation scheme, the narrow list, is only for some vaccines but not others. Myocarditis and pericarditis, various blood clot issues, GBS, Guillain-Barré syndrome, capillary leak syndrome, shoulder injury from the needle, anaphylaxis, and a particular skin condition. The things that are not covered, which are reactions that can be quite serious, seen in heavily in our groups and also in the expanding medical literature, but not in the compensation scheme, include vaccine-induced ME/CFS.
Sorry, can you just
slow down?
Yeah. Sorry. What was that one?
So the conditions that are not covered in the compensation scheme, but that feature heavily in our groups and in medical literature, which is constantly emerging.
Sure.
But not at all in this compensation conditions, compensatable conditions, include the following: vaccine-induced ME/CFS.
What is that an abbreviation?
Chronic fatigue syndrome or myalgic encephalomyelitis. POTS, tachycardia, mast cell activation syndrome, dysautonomia, autoimmune conditions, costochondritis, ventricular dysfunction, cardiac arrest, stroke, tinnitus, vertigo, menstrual and fertility issues, thyroid disorders, and there's a much longer list than that as well.
Are you able to table that?
Sure.
Thank you.
So just a mountain of stuff, you know.
Mountain of stuff. And I was thinking of one particular client as she rattled off that list who's got about 8 of those conditions.
That's crazy. 8 of them.
Yeah.
These poor people, they must be in just so much agony.
And this is a young woman that I'm talking about, a relatively young woman who has lost her ability to run her business and is living off her savings, her rapidly shrinking savings. Yeah, these people. Honestly, I often ask myself, what does it take to get people out in the street with pitchforks? I don't quite understand why these people who've been so horrendously injured, both physically and financially and psychologically, why aren't they angrier? And the parents whose children have been killed by these injections that children never needed, why aren't they hopping mad? Why aren't they down in Parliament? Why are they besieging the place? I don't know.
It is crazy, isn't it? Because you see, like at the moment, you see the farmer protests and all that stuff in Europe, but
you
didn't see any for the mandates. You don't see any from all the people that have been injured by it.
Yeah, I think so much of that was the job that media did in, number one, ramping up so much fear in people's minds, fear that was referred to frequently in the course of these submissions, that people were so afraid at first. And I was just about jumping out of my skin saying, will somebody please point out that fear was very intentionally cultivated by government and the media, and there was no rational reason for that fear. Certainly from whenever the analysis of the Diamond Princess was published, that was very early on in the piece, maybe February, March of 2020. Once that analysis of fatalities on the Diamond Princess was published, it should have been game over. Right? No one should have been afraid. I mean, obviously, if you're 85 and in bad health, be afraid, right? Or don't be afraid, like take rational means to protect yourself. Everyone else should have just gone, oh, really? So it kills very old, sick people, but I'm not old and I'm not sick. I guess I'll be okay.
What I found pretty astonishing by that is they've managed to somehow turn the Diamond Princess into the big boogeyman.
Yeah,
you keep hearing it referenced like, oh, we don't want another Diamond Princess. You know, when that's like what was it? Three people that died out of 1,000 people or something.
Yeah, out of a shipload of mostly elderly, pretty unwell people. I mean, not exactly the world's deadliest pandemic if it can't do more harm than that on a ship full of elderly people. Not the world's greatest bioweapon if the intention was to murder a bunch of people, was it?
No, I mean, once again, this is why we need a royal commission.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so why aren't people angry? Because they were made to feel so afraid. And then, of course, there was this massive gaslighting operation. An enormous psychological warfare perpetrated on the people to make them believe that the only way to be a good person in the midst of this terrifying, unprecedented crisis was to wear your mask and take your damn vaccines and get in line and stand on the stupid dot in the supermarket and all the other bollocks. Yeah. So I'm guessing that's why people aren't angrier. I don't know whether they feel the anger, but they're still too afraid to express it, or whether they just don't feel it. If they don't feel it, I don't quite understand. Because if it were my child.
Yeah, as you said, though, I think it's just the propaganda. I mean, just thinking back to, like, funnily enough, first time I've actually thought about this is cruise ships. They have their own morgues on the cruise ship because people die all the time on cruise ships.
Yep.
They die all the time. So what's to say those 3 people wouldn't have died anyway?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's just all fear based, and obviously, like we saw with those stats earlier, at least 52% of the population probably sees through that shit now. After that,
yep.
You know, that's still, as you said, at least 48% who are completely brainwashed, and there's no. If after the last 4 years, it is.
Yeah.
If after the last 4 years,
What does it take? Seriously, what does it take to slap some sense into these people? Anyway.
We're a very docile, peaceful nation, I think, and you know, we don't want conflict. We don't want to raise a fuss, and I think ultimately everybody wants someone else to do the dirty work for them. So that's why it's not really happening.
Yep. It's when Donald Horne wrote The Lucky Country back in, when was that published? 60s, I believe. Most people who heard about that book, I guess, never read it, or if they did, they didn't understand it. You know, he wasn't saying, "Oh, Australia's really lucky." He was saying, you know, this is a great country. Shame about the people, basically. You know, this is a country that has so much in the way of natural resources, and Australians just cruise. They, you know, we have allowed our country, really since the founding of it, to be a quarry and a farm. And I don't know. It's so maddening. It's anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's very, very worrying, at the very least. So what you'll see next is pretty much my theory of what's happened in government. You know, I'm not a big believer in all the government getting together with the WEF and coming up with a scheme. I think it's a lot more to do with influence of corporations and everything, but I'll let him say, because he says it quite eloquently.
Major decisions that impacted almost every Australian throughout the pandemic. Now, of course, you know, the lockdowns and various types of mandates and whatever. Our particular concern are those that affected the messaging and the mandates around vaccines, the communication around vaccines. So, for example, we were originally told, you know, we were going to hit this 80% target in many of the cities around Australia. Once we're at 80%, we open up, and then things changed all of a sudden to 90%. What happened? And that's a question we want answered. There have been certain concerns raised in our community that there may have been political interference involved, either, you know, from the policy people and public health policy people who wanted to see bigger vaccine uptake. Was there pharmaceutical company interference or lobbyists in the offices of decision makers trying to advise them on the benefits of extending that 80% to 90% or whatever, so that they could, you know, on the back end, make a lot more profit, unfortunately. So, you know, what happened behind the scenes to affect these decisions, which left a lot of people like us in very difficult health situations. And it wasn't just, you know, that 80 to 90%. There's a whole range of other areas where public health decisions were made that had consequences for people, but on the other side of it, made some people very rich. And it's hard to imagine that there was not some level of influence that some of these actors had.
Chair, I just want to acknowledge the precise and careful and highly responsible language both our witnesses are using in their responses.
Okay, thank you, Senator Roberts. Senator Shoebridge, you have the call.
I'm not being. I think you are. Sorry, I just want to say sometimes when witnesses make general comments and they're not specific, that's actually can be more difficult for us to deal with as a committee, because if you make an adverse comment about someone, they can respond. But making comments on generally speculative about some level of corruption and political interference can be difficult for us unless you have specific evidence of it. I have a different view from Senator Roberts about how this language can be dealt with by the committee, and maybe it's helpful if we can raise some points of order as we go through. But
can I make a little comment on that? We are a group of...
I can see what you're trying to do, but actually... when you make general statements like that, it can be quite difficult.
Sorry, Senator Green, I will give the witness an opportunity to respond to that. If you can do it
maybe
as
you want to clarify which comment you have an issue with.
Senator Roberts said you were using careful language, and my response to that is actually because you have not been specific in the allegations that you've made, we can't deal with them as a committee and provide anyone an opportunity to give a response.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is territory for a royal commission, but I mean, on that.
You're muted, Mitch.
Perfect response,
Yes, indeed. That's why we need the bloody commission. They're not making specific allegations because they don't know. That's why it needs to be investigated, you twit. That was me editorializing.
Yeah. Well, me thinks she protests a little bit too much there. So,
and I think she deserved the very curt answer that very, very impressive woman gave her.
Yeah. It's hard to be more impressed by that woman. She's did such a good job, and just that comment at the end that was so
beautiful.
Good. Just delivered perfectly, perfect timing.
Game, set, and match. Yeah.
One other interesting thing about these guys is they went on to say that anybody who has been compensated for their injury had to sign a non-disclosure agreement with the government.
Yes. What the hell's that about? What possible justification is there for that?
It's crazy. So I mean, it really backs up that comment. Was there backroom deals going on between the government and Pfizer?
Mm-hmm.
I think obviously there was. We know what was happening in Europe, with Ursula von der Leyen and her text messages to
the veterinarian. Yeah.
Yeah, the veterinarian.
World's highest paid vet. Yes, and all set that to the side for one moment. It's pretty clear that government is trying to minimise the amount that it's actually paying out to these people, isn't it? I mean, that's the practical ramification of not publicising the amounts that are being paid to people, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to minimise the number of people who are making claims and the size of those claims.
Yeah, interesting thing that Shoebridge said in this whole chat at the end here. He sort of said, and I don't know why he said this, but it just goes to show what they think of anybody who questions the narrative thinks. And he said, well, don't you think it could be as simple as, the government trying to cover themselves and not pay out too much? And they're like, well, yeah, that's kind of exactly what we think. He goes, it's not some grand conspiracy. And I don't think they ever said in that it's a grand conspiracy.
No, they did not. Again, straw man. Shoebridge specialises in straw men.
Yeah.
Should get a starring role in The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, I'd say so. He'd make a very, very fine straw man, that man. But we have come to the end of the inquiry. There has been talks by Malcolm that there's going to be another one coming up. So, I mean, I want to get your final thoughts on, and I know you said at the start that you and your husband probably don't think it's going to happen, an actual Royal Commission. But
I think there's going to be very significant pressure against it. One of the things that I noted was that that Senator Green, the Labor senator, who was deputy chair, she repeatedly asked just about everyone who appeared, had they already submitted or had they already made a submission to the various other state and federal inquiries. And the second or third time that she asked this, it kind of clicked in my brain. She's essentially, her argument is that there's no need for a Royal Commission because there have already been various inquiries at state and federal level. And so she's attempting to kind of wedge all the people who haven't submitted or haven't made submissions to these other inquiries to say, well, you had your chance there, so you missed that. You don't need a Royal Commission because that's already been done. Well, that's my read on it anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's right. I think second that with she kind of was trying to make people look silly if they hadn't as well. Because I know that during when the People's with Julian Gillespie, when he was asked, he just said, well, everybody on here doesn't believe in the inquiry, so we haven't made a submission. So it's kind of like, oh, well, you haven't made a submission, you can't be taking this seriously then. It's to be honest, I was surprised there have been so many inquiries because I haven't heard about any, and maybe I've just missed it, but I don't remember there being an inquiry. I think I heard about one in Western Australia and that was it. But
and if you haven't heard about them, then how widely were they publicised? How much opportunity was the public given to actually weigh in on these various inquiries?
Well, obviously not much, because I'd say I'm pretty savvy with what I read. I'm reading about this stuff all the time, and if I miss that, then
it wasn't widely
out there.
publicised. The kindy teacher from the Nurses Association, again, no offence to kindy teachers, they're generally very nice people, but the chief kindy teacher referred to a couple of inquiries that I hadn't heard of, including one into exploitation of people with disabilities, and also an inquiry into what happened in the nursing homes. Now, I didn't hear of either of those.
No, neither did I. So,
and I'm sure there are a lot of people who would have a lot to say about what was done to elderly people in nursing homes. And I happen to have a client who has a sister who is in a disability care facility, and the things that these people were put through during this disability care facility in Victoria, I should add as well. So the things that were done to these unbelievably vulnerable people, depriving them of visits with family members and so forth. I mean, how do you think a person with serious intellectual disabilities is going to cope with that, where they're not allowed to see their family members for extended periods of time, or they're only allowed contact with one and only with a freaking mask on? Now, so there's a lot of people I know who, if they'd known of a commission of inquiry like that, you better believe they would have put in a submission.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. I mean, I know people that worked, including my sister, who's worked in nursing homes over that time, and it was just horrific. Even just for the staff. The staff were tortured over that time, the way they were made to wear PPE and take vaccines and all sorts of stuff. It's just pretty atrocious. They copped it really hard. It was one of the worst places to be, probably, if not the worst place to be. I've heard some horror stories from there, hospitals, all sorts.
Oh, God, so, absolutely. Yep. Appalling treatment of both staff and patients or residents. Yeah.
Well, we can only hope this will go places. I'm not sure if it will, but at least everybody's got a bit more of a good understanding of what happened. Highly recommend watching it. If you would like, I will put the notes about other time codes that I've got here into the show notes, so you can watch the clips in full. It does give you a pretty good overview of things. And at minimum, it's a great, I would say, compendium of evidence from a whole range of people who either personally or professionally were, everyone in the country was affected by government policy, but just as a compendium of evidence about how harmful the government response to COVID was. It's pretty amazing. It's a great resource. Yeah. So highly recommend watching it. Do it on 1.5 speed. Definitely. I did it on 2 speed, and it was still.
Wow. That's next level. Yes. And if you do have trouble controlling yourself at certain points, take my tip and lift weights, or maybe like get the punching bag out, while you're listening to it.
Just remember how expensive the LCD screen is, where your
that's right. That's right. We don't want any injured. Yeah, don't want any hand injuries either. So yeah,
don't do any rash.
we care about you.
We certainly do. But in the meantime, please just subscribe to us. Chuck a little like on the videos as well. I noticed we got quite a few likes last time I said that, so thank you very much. It does help to spread the word and to get more people watching this and coming to Stand Up Australia. So please do that, and we'll see you again next week. But in the meantime, have a great weekend, and thanks, Robyn, again, and see you next week.
You're welcome. All right, see you then.